Chapter 9 The Rose is Red. Caddie went back to school again in February. Her long vacation had grown tiresome. Even the excitement of finding the breeches and clogs and of hearing Father's story, even the delight of being Father's partner in business, did not make up for the long, lonely hours when the other children were at school. She was glad to be back at school in time for Valentine's Day, for that was always fun. On that day most of the children exchanged comics, but you could tell which boys had sweethearts because their fancies betrayed them into paper lace and true love knots, turtle doves, and clasped hands. Tom had been pensive for several days before Valentine's Day. "Golly, Caddie," he said one day, "if I had a silver dollar like you have. Say, why don't you spend it for Valentine's?" "A whole silver dollar for Valentine's!" cried Caddie, her thrifty soul sincerely shocked. She felt a little superior to Tom because she knew that he could never save his money. "Well, maybe not all of it," said Tom, "but say, you just ought to see the beauties they've got down to Dunville store." Caddie considered the matter. It did not occur to her that possibly Tom was hinting at a loan. But she had kept her dollar for so long now that she had grown a little miserly. She saved 6 pennies beside her silver dollar, and these she took out and put in her pocket on February 13th. After school that day, with her pennies jingling pleasantly in her pocket, she started for the Dunville store. Hetty, who had bought hers weeks in advance, and Warren, who thought that valentines were silly, trudged home across the fields. But where was Tom? He had been the first one out of the schoolhouse, and now he was nowhere to be seen. Caddie broke into a trot, and, just as she came in sight of Dunville store, she saw a familiar figure disappearing into the back door. Tom! Why the back door? And why was Tom so mysterious these days? Caddie went in and chose 6 penny comics. One for Tom, one for Warren, one for Hetty, and the rest for Maggie, Jane, and Lida Silvernagle. Then she stood transfixed at the sight of the most beautiful valentine that she had ever seen. It was propped up against a tobacco jar so that everyone could admire it. It was all paper lace and roses and violets, and in the center of a pink heart was printed, "The rose is red, the violet's blue, sugar is sweet, and so are you." Caddie almost regretted that she had left her dollar at home. This was so beautiful. Still, she wouldn't know whom to give it. She wasn't sweet on anybody. "How much is it?" she asked the storekeeper, who just to satisfy her curiosity. "2 bits," Mr. Adam replied, with a twinkle in his eyes. "But I guess it's sold, Caddie. There's a young man in the back room here sprouting potatoes for it." "Oh!" said Caddie. Now she knew. It was Tom. But was it for her, this lovely valentine? It seemed impossible. Tom always gave her the rudest kind of comics, and she thought them fun. Yet who was a better friend to Tom than she? No one, surely. She went home slowly, wondering. She knew that Tom wouldn't want anyone to know that he was sprouting potatoes to earn a valentine, so she locked his secret in her heart. It was the first one she had ever known him to have from her. The next day the schoolhouse was full of titters and whisperings. Miss Parker resigned herself to keep what order she could. Valentine's Day was a day to be got through as best one might, and she was glad that it came only once a year. Mysterious envelopes and scraps of paper kept appearing on desks. Children squirmed excitedly in their seats. Silas Bunn even upset an inkwell over his sister Maggie's taffy-colored pigtail, in an effort to punch the boy who had given him a picture of a donkey sitting on a dunce's stool. Caddie hastily scanned her valentines. She hadn't expected the rose's red one, and yet she couldn't help looking just to make sure. But it wasn't there. The comic ones were very funny, though, and there was a little bag of candy hearts from Sam Flusher, who held no hard feelings even if she did beat him sometimes in spell downs. Altogether, it was a good day. At morning recess, someone slipped in and hung a slate on the front of Teacher's desk. On it were drawn 2 long-legged, skinny creatures with heads like buttons labeled Teacher and Obadiah. They were fighting, and around them was drawn a heart. Teacher, not having occasion to go in front of her desk and see it, attributed the unusual amount of giggling to the influence of the day. But Obadiah had to sit gazing at the slate with growing fury until noon. At noon, as soon as Miss Parker had gone into the hallway for her lunch basket, Obadiah seized the slate in his big hands and broke it into 4 pieces, which he flung into the stove. He glared around the room without saying a word, and then stalked outdoors. Obadiah was tamed, but the children saw with awe that he was still a lion at heart. Still, the Rose's red valentine did not appear, and Caddie began to wonder if Tom had got tired of sprouting potatoes before it was won. Then, when they came in from afternoon recess, she saw it, lying in a square, white envelope on Katie Hyman's desk. Surely she had known that it would be there all the time. Katie saw it too, and blushed and shook her curls over her face. It was the first valentine that she had had that day, for she was so shy that no one dared to give her penny comics. Her little pale, slim fingers, that were so quick with the needle, trembled as she opened it, and then everybody who had gathered around said, "Oh!" for they recognized it at once as the best valentine in the Dunville store. Katy turned it around and looked all over it, but there was no name on it anywhere. She was smiling more than they had ever seen her smile, and her eyes sparkled, almost as if they had tears in them. Caddy looked at Tom, but he was standing by the stove finishing an apple and talking with some of the boys as if he had never heard of valentines in his life. After school, Hetty was all excited. "Caddy, did you see that great big valentine Katie Hyman got? Who do you suppose sent it? There wasn't any name, but I am sure that Tom sent it. Don't you think so? I'm going to tell everybody so." Caddy's heart jumped. If Hetty told, it would make Tom's life miserable. "Why, Hetty," she said gaily, putting her arm around the walking newspaper, "whatever put that in your head? You know Tom can't save a cent. Then how do you suppose he could buy the finest valentine in the store without any money?" "That's so," said Hetty. "I know. Maybe she got it for herself, just to make folks think she had a beau." Busy with this happy thought, Hetty broke into a run. Katy walked along more slowly. She was thinking, "I do everything with Tom. I'm much more fun than Katy. Why, she is afraid of horses and snakes, and she wouldn't cross the river for worlds. I don't believe she's spoken 3 words to Tom in her life. But she's what you call a little lady, and I'm just a tomboy. Maybe there's something in this lady business after all." But just then Warren caught up with her and said, "Hey, let's go coasting. All this silly Valentine sugar plum stuff." And she raced away with him, laughing and eager to be the first one on the hill with her sled. The ever-increasing trial that the little Woodlawns had to endure this winter was turkey. How far away now seemed that autumn day when they had capered and danced, shouting, "Turkey every day! Hooray, hooray, hooray!" When the school lunches were being packed, one of the boys was sure to appear and say, "Mother, what are we going to have in our bread today?" Sometimes Mrs. Woodlawn said brown sugar or jelly, but usually the answer was, "Cold turkey, dear." "Oh, that! There's nothing nicer than turkey on bread, my child. Think of all the poor children who would be glad of a nice turkey sandwich." Tom and Caddy and Warren had often thought of those poor children who had no turkey. Secretly, they envied them. One can endure beef every day, or even salt pork. One eats it mechanically without thinking, but not turkey. No matter how disguised with onions or cabbage or sage dressing, turkey is always turkey. One day Tom made a valuable discovery. The little half-breed Hankinsons brought buckets of parched corn to school for lunch. Now that they were tired of turkey, there was nothing the Woodlawns liked better than parched corn. Undoubtedly, Tom said, the Hankinsons were the poor children Mother meant, who would be glad of a nice turkey sandwich. The little Hankinsons looked hungrily at the beautiful slices of white bread which were the pride of Mother and Mrs. Conroy. They sniffed the delicate aroma of roast turkey. Upon Tom's advice, Caddy made the first advances. "How would you like a piece of white bread and some turkey, Gussie?" she said to the eldest boy, holding out a sandwich temptingly. Gussie's black eyes sparkled in his brown face. In all his 9 years he had never been offered a piece of white bread with turkey in it. Jerked venison they had at home, and salt pork, but his mother cooked as the Indians did, and his father was too indolent to try to teach her the white man's way of preparing food. The 2 little brothers crowded close to Gussie, and the youngest one held out his hand. "You give us parched corn," said Caddy. "We give you turkey bread." "We do," said Gussie, and the 3 little Hankinsons ran to get their pails of parched corn. After that it was easily arranged. Whenever the Woodlawns had turkey in their lunch, they traded buckets with the Hankinsons, and everyone was happy. Caddy's birthday was on February 22nd, the same as George Washington's. There were too many of the young Woodlawns for anyone to make a fuss over their birthdays. It was pleasant enough to be alive without thinking to celebrate the day on which one had begun to be so. But with Caddy it was a little different. Not at home, of course, but at school, teacher hung up a flag and there were songs and speeches. "I know they're not for me exactly," Caddy confided to Tom, "and yet I guess I enjoy them more than George Washington does." Teachers said that President Lincoln had his birthday in February, too, and Caddie wished more than ever that she had been a boy. Perhaps could have grown up to be a president then, but now she would have to leave that to Tom or Warren. This year Miss Parker let Caddie hold the flag while the others sang. She stood straight and proud at the front of the room beside Miss Parker's desk, her eyes on the lovely stars and stripes, Mr. Lincoln's flag, the flag of the North, Caddie Woodlawn's flag. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light? Her heart always soared with the familiar words and seemed to break in a shower of delight on "How proudly we hailed." All about her she saw the sparkle of bombs bursting in the air, beautiful bombs that would not hurt anyone. She thought of father looking through the barred gate at peacocks on an English lawn, and she lifted her head, saying fiercely to herself, "I love America more than Maggie Bunn or Lida or Jane. I'm more American than all of them because they were unkind to father and England."